Chapter 43. When the truth begins to burn. She was so furious, she couldn't find an insult worthy of the moment.
"I'll go up to my room," she murmured. "I need to be alone." She didn't say she was planning to leave.
She didn't have the strength for another argument. She walked out without saying goodbye, her throat tight, tears waiting their turn. She found Hale in the dining room, examining the silver with delight. Seeing her, he slid a fork into his bag and smiled, satisfied.
"I'll take all this, girl.
Rowan won't mind.
This is how a respectable collection begins." "I'm sure he won't," Ophelia replied. "Uncle, I need to talk to you."
The men left. Ophelia sat beside him and in a low voice explained her decision. She told him what had happened over the past weeks with careful silences, no nightmares, no Rowan. Hale grunted, muttered, but in the end he nodded.
He trusted her. He always had. "I'll wait for you at the cabin," he promised. "Take care of your back. You know how sneaky the worms can be." She nodded.
The lesson was unforgettable. She went upstairs to pack. Passing Edmund's room, she heard laughter and sobs. The reunion had overwhelmed their mother. Ophelia smiled wearily. My task is done, she thought. Jem and Thomas were waiting in the hallway. Jem handed her the small gift she had asked Hale for.
"We're coming with you, right?"
Thomas whispered.
"Yes. I'll prepare the horses. They'll hang you for stealing one."
Jem smiled.
"Rowan won't say a word."
Ophelia entered Rowan's room and placed a white rose on the bedspread.
"I am the night guardian," she whispered. As she turned, she saw the black coat draped over a chair. She took it almost without thinking. It still smelled like him. Something for the nights to come.
Rowan believed Ophelia was resting. Silas convinced him to leave her in peace.
"She doesn't take orders easily," he reminded him.
Rowan knew that. They spoke of planned ships and faking deaths. Hale protested burning a vessel.
"It's good firewood wasted. And thank God it's not the Cordelia.
I'd rather drive a stake through myself than damage it.
It was our home."
They also agreed that Ophelia would stay out of all of it. Hours later, Silas returned laughing.
"Hale plans to leave you without silver. He cares about appearances." "Let him take it," Rowan replied. "It's time to speak with your sister. If you lecture her." "No. I'll tell her what I expect."
Silas hesitated.
"That sounds the same."
They stepped into the foyer as the Duchess descended the stairs, her eyes still shining from crying. Seeing Silas, she paused, surprised, and then smiled with restrained emotion as she approached Rowan. Nothing was resolved.
But everything had begun to move.
Chapter 44.
The scandal that does not yet exist.
They entered the foyer just as the Duchess was descending the stairs. Alicia was smiling, her eyes still wet from crying freely and without regret. Seeing Silas, she stopped, surprised, gripping the railing. She composed herself immediately and continued toward Rowan, taking his arm.
"Is he the pirate friend of Edmund?" she whispered. "No, I'm not the night guardian, ma'am," Silas replied. "Just his friend." She studied him openly. "He looks like a pirate. Have you seen many?"
Rowan asked dryly.
"None," she admitted. "But the long hair, the scar, and the blood help." "The last part is decisive," Rowan added. The Duchess nodded solemnly. "Pirates like to fight."
Edmund had tried to keep the secret, but Alicia smiled indulgently.
"Henry knows who the night guardian is."
"Henry is never wrong."
"Then it must be me," Silas accepted, bowing his head. She relaxed. "I'll keep the secret."
"Where is the young lady I must apologize to?"
"Upstairs," Silas replied. "Naturally," she said. "I must also thank her for what she has done for this family." She turned to Silas decisively.
"Poe.
I want to kiss you.
He obeyed, bewildered. Alizia kissed him on both cheeks.
Wash the blood off. Then Henry will receive you properly. Will you kiss me too?
Rowan asked, amused.
Don't be ridiculous.
Without further explanation, the Duchess headed to the dining room.
My boy is too thin.
Holling will know what to do. Rowan went upstairs immediately. Ophelia was his only urgency. Silas stayed behind, counting mentally. Alizia nestled into her husband's arms. Rowan went outside with Hale.
And Ophelia, she finally added. She was worried Edmund would be the favorite.
Rowan froze.
Where did that come from? It doesn't matter. I don't want her to worry.
Hale smiled.
You'll have to ask for her hand properly. In front of my men. But first you'll have to find her.
Panic swept through him.
She's not upstairs.
Hale shook his head.
Where is she? I wouldn't be loyal to tell you. You. Didn't you notice Jem and Thomas aren't here? He cut him off. That says plenty.
Ophelia is still in danger.
No. She's running from you.
Rowan stormed in so violently the door nearly gave way.
Where are you going?
Hale shouted mockingly.
To find her. Can you track?
Rowan didn't answer.
She made you run after her, Hale insisted. She impressed you.
Rowan turned.
What are you getting at? That you impress her for once.
He ran up the stairs 2 at a time. When Silas caught up, Rowan was already taking off his shirt.
Ophelia left, he said. Will you follow her? Yes. I'm coming with you. No.
Silas hesitated, then nodded.
Are you good at tracking? I am. She left you something.
Silas picked up the white rose from the bed.
Is she in love with you? Yes, Rowan said. She doesn't know it yet.
Silas set the rose down.
She was saying goodbye. Not completely. Maybe she wanted to remind you who she is. Partly, Rowan admitted. And partly she's trying to impress me.
Silas smiled. As he descended, Rowan gave quick orders: have Langford find Redgrave, wait for his return, watch everything.
Where is he going, my lord?
Holling asked. Rowan was already opening the door.
Hunting.
And he left, slamming the door behind him. Chapter 45. The scam. What had seemed for weeks like a string of personal deceptions was, in reality, a high-level political scam, woven in the grey zone where war, espionage, and maritime trade intersect. The so-called tribunal was not a conventional judicial body, but a secretive power structure, semi-clandestine, created during the Regency to protect England's strategic interests without going through Parliament or the Crown directly. It operated like a consortium of high-ranking officials, financiers, and military officers who funded covert operations, manipulated information, and used intermediaries, pirates, mercenaries, smugglers, to destabilize enemies or safeguard vital trade routes. In this context of latent war, blockades, naval espionage, unstable alliances, the Covenant needed unofficial channels, men and women capable of moving outside the law without leaving a trace. The scam consisted of diverting funds and strategic goods, under the guise of the Covenant's operations. Someone on the inside used their authority to cover up thefts, sabotage and betrayals, compromising England's security. The danger was not only economic. If the deception came to light, England would be exposed to its enemies and the Covenant would be dismantled. To prevent this, a parallel investigative network was activated. Ophelia entered this world not out of ambition, but out of loyalty and a sense of duty. Raised among sailors, pirates, and unwritten codes, her morality did not answer to the law but to honor. Her involvement was born of a promise to her brother, to Hale, to herself, and a deep conviction: if England fell, so too would the margins of freedom in which she and her people survived. Ophelia, or the Night Guardian, knew how to operate where no one else could. She stole, yes, but she stole to uncover, to bring the truth to light. The Covenant used her without fully trusting her. She used them in turn, aware that in the end no one would protect her own but herself. Hale, Black Hale, embodied the moral ambiguity of the sea. A pirate, yes, but not a traitor. For him, wars between nations were a game of power that did not concern him. What mattered was that his men survived, and that Ophelia was not devoured by a world that forgave no one acting from the margins. His participation was pragmatic. He collaborated when convenient, intimidated when necessary, and constantly reminded the respectable men that without figures like him, their wars could not be sustained.
The Hound.
Meanwhile, the Bloodhound was Rowan's operational name within the Covenant's missions. He was not merely an assassin, he was a human tracker, a man trained to locate threats, neutralize them, and vanish. His reputation, protector of the weak, relentless executor, made him an almost mythical figure. The mistake the Covenant made was forgetting that myths also feel. Rowan had been used as an instrument, never as a subject. When Ophelia read his file, she understood that the real man did not fully match the legend. She saw the child shaped by violence, the soldier turned weapon, the man who was never allowed to choose. That is why Ophelia did not flee from him, but toward him, even knowing the risk. She manipulated him, yes, but she also protected him. Both played with half-truths, convinced the other was stronger than they really were. In that conflict, Edmund played a key role. He was the official excuse, the visible reason Ophelia approached Rowan's family. Protecting him, heir, political pawn, symbol, justified her presence and her movements. But Edmund fell in love with Ophelia because she represented everything he was not: freedom, courage, action. Yet his love was idealized, closer to admiration than to mature desire. He competed with Rowan not only for Ophelia, but for identity, to stop being the protected son and become someone worthy of being chosen.
The conflict between them erupted.
The tension between Rowan and Edmund was not just romantic, it was structural. One had been trained to obey and destroy, the other to inherit and preserve. Ophelia entered the scene like a catalyst, forcing both to see each other without masks.
But Rowan feared having been used.
And Edmund feared not having been enough. Ophelia, at the center, realized that loving one meant hurting the other, and that saving England could cost her the one thing she had never known how to steal without guilt: the heart. What was at stake for Rowan now was not only finding Ophelia, but deciding whether he would remain the Bloodhound, or become a man capable of choosing her, even against the world that had created him. Chapter 46. The Covenant's umbrella.
But who were the villains in this story?
There wasn't a single visible, named antagonist from the start. The antagonists were a specific faction within the system itself, men operating under the umbrella of the Covenant, who had corrupted it for their own gain. They were Covenant officials, financiers tied to the war effort, naval intermediaries, and covert agents. They did not aim to destroy England, they sought wealth and power, even if it left the country vulnerable. The enemy was not outside, but within.
Yes, but without a face.
They appeared as contradictory orders, manipulated reports, unsigned pursuits, administrative silences, men following instructions without giving names. Silas sensed it. Hale suspected it. Ophelia confirmed it. Rowan began to see it too late. The danger was not a man with a dagger, but a structure deciding who lived and who vanished. They hunted Ophelia because she knew too much. She had accessed sealed files. She connected shipping routes with diverted funds. She understood that certain failed missions were not mistakes, but operations designed to fail. She saw that the name of the Bloodhound was being used to cover actions Rowan had never carried out. In other words, Ophelia could prove that someone inside the Covenant was stealing from England. And that made her an intolerable witness.
Chapter 47. Betrayal dressed as respect.
The cruel irony lay in why they were hunting Rowan. Rowan wasn't pursued because he was guilty, but because he was too useful and too dangerous at the same time.
He was loyal. He was effective. He had a reputation.
And above all, he could track the truth. When Ophelia began acting near him, the conspirators realized that if Rowan connected the dots, there would be no hiding place.
That's why they kept him busy, gave him partial orders, pushed him to protect Ophelia without explaining why. And when the time came, they would be willing to sacrifice him as a scapegoat.
So when Ophelia and Rowan protected each other, from whom were they really protecting themselves? From three distinct but connected things: from the agents of corrupt covenant, who wanted to silence Ophelia, from the system itself, which would use Rowan until it destroyed him, and from themselves because trusting meant lowering their guard. Ophelia protected Rowan, hiding how deep the betrayal ran, manipulating his protective instinct to keep him alive and away from the filthiest core of the plot. Rowan protected Ophelia physically, with his name and authority, becoming a shield she never asked for but needed. Both believed the other was stronger. Both were slightly wrong. And yet it worked.
They seemed pursued without clear reason.
Because the enemy could not show itself. If the conspirators revealed themselves, the covenant would collapse, the war would shift, and the crown would demand heads. So they acted like shadows, hiring men who didn't ask questions, causing incidents, forcing escapes, hoping Ophelia would vanish into the sea. The villains, a corrupt faction of the covenant, had indeed appeared, yes, as a system, not as individuals. They hunted Ophelia because she could expose them. They threatened Rowan because he was the only one who could destroy them. Ophelia and Rowan protected each other because together they were a dangerous anomaly to power. When Rowan went hunting, he wasn't just chasing a fleeing woman, he was chasing a truth that, once reached, could never be returned to the sea.
Chapter 48.
Passions that go unconfessed. They arrived at night at the secluded inn Hale used as a refuge. Ophelia had insisted on an unnecessary detour, 2 more hours of travel to make sure they left no trail. Thomas and Jem arrived exhausted, she remained alert. The innkeeper, an old acquaintance of Black Hale, asked no questions. He didn't glance twice at the well-dressed young woman escorted by 2 men of ill repute. Curiosity served no one. Ophelia took the central room on the upper floor, the men the adjacent ones. The stairs creaked like a warning, and the walls were thin enough that no one feared a silent intrusion. She bathed, wrapped herself in Rowan's robe, out of necessity she told herself, and lay down, body stiff, the wound still aching, praying for a night without nightmares.
The cold woke her halfway.
Then the heat. Rowan was there.
She hadn't heard him enter.
She only felt the firm arm around her, the familiar gesture that stilled her trembling. She leaned against him before fully realizing.
"Rowan," she murmured, still half asleep. "Shush," he whispered, barely a breath. "You wouldn't want to wake your guardians."
The awakening was sudden. Ophelia tried to sit up. His hand held her back with gentle insistence.
"If you scream, they'll come. And I don't want to hurt them." He let her go slowly.
She looked at him, tense.
"How did you get in?"
Rowan smiled in the darkness.
"I'm impressing you, aren't I?" "Don't joke." "I'm not joking. I came because you ran."
The silence filled with everything they hadn't said. Ophelia felt his closeness as both an assault and a refuge at once.
"Have you come to say goodbye?" she asked, voice sharp.
"No. I came to stay." He kissed her without hurry, as if claiming a territory already known. Ophelia responded before deciding, and that betrayal immediately raised a wall.
"Rowan, I love you," he said without grandiosity. "I'm not asking you to say it. Not yet." She closed her eyes. I won't change for you. I haven't asked you to. I'll grow tired. You'll grow tired. No.
The certainty disarmed her more than any caress.
Leave here, she said, without conviction.
Give me 2 months.
2. Not 1. Not 3.
2.
And what will happen in those 2 months? I'll try to convince you. Of what? That I won't leave you if I come for you.
Ophelia looked at him, incredulous.
And if I don't want you to?
Rowan pressed his forehead to hers.
Then I'll leave. But not before. The creak of the bed brought them back to reality.
Ophelia tensed.
Thomas and Jem. They're asleep. They trust you. You shouldn't be here. And you shouldn't be running from me.
They kissed again, shorter this time. Ophelia turned her face away.
Promising 2 months isn't promising me. It's enough.
She sighed, overcome by fatigue and something more dangerous. 2 months, she said at last, nothing more. Rowan smiled in the darkness.
Nothing less.
Chapter 49. Sleeping on the wrong side of the bed. She moved toward him, but when the bed creaked again under her weight, she froze, as if the world had suddenly remembered its own fragility.
We can't, she murmured, broken.
We can, Rowan replied in a low whisper, firm as a riverbank. He kissed her and the unease dissolved. Ophelia felt something in her give way, like a river that stops resisting the slope and begins to flow. Everything else, the men in the adjoining rooms, the danger, the escape, fell far behind upstream. Rowan guided her without haste, like someone who knows the channel even in the dark. His hands set the rhythm, and Ophelia surrendered to that warm current pulling her along, ever deeper. She clung to him like a solid log in the midst of the overflow, biting her lip to keep his name from slipping free.
The creak came again, louder, and then the world dropped to level.
The blanket fell, the cold floor received them, and Rowan absorbed the impact without letting her go, shielding her as if even gravity were conspiring against her. Ophelia ended up on top of him, breathing hard, unable to still the trembling.
Now, he told her, barely a breath. Trust.
And Ophelia trusted.
The current took them completely.
There was no thought, only rhythm, forward, back, losing themselves and finding each other again. The river swelled, burst its banks, and Ophelia arched against him when the tide finally reached her, silent and devastating, carrying away all resistance. They remained like that, entwined, as the pulse slowed and the water returned to its channel. Ophelia buried her face in the hollow of Rowan's neck, exhausted, warm, safe. He held her as if he feared the world might still try to claim her.
What are you thinking? He asked after a while. She didn't answer. She just closed her eyes. I know you reached the end of the river, he added, with a smile she didn't see. Don't try to deny it. No, Ophelia admitted almost shyly.
Rowan lifted her carefully, as if she were still floating, and returned her to the bed. Beneath the covers, she tried to turn away, but he stopped her, making her look at him.
So what? Did I impress you?
Ophelia studied him. The dimple appeared again, insolent.
Maybe, she said. A little.
Rowan's hand slid down just slightly, more suggestion than gesture.
I can do better. I don't doubt it, she replied with a tired half-smile.
When he finally let her rest, Ophelia fell asleep in his arms, listening to the beat of his heart like someone hearing a distant river, steady. That night there were no nightmares.
Chapter 50.
Bringing the truth to light. They returned to Rowan's house near midday. Thomas and Jem hurried off toward Low-Water Quay with an almost guilty haste. The previous night had left them badly shaken, and both knew they had underestimated the Marquis. Ophelia promised not to betray them, but Thomas was convinced he would never get over the humiliation of not having been caught while asleep. He still did not understand how Rowan, with his imposing bulk, had entered the room without making a sound. Ophelia changed her dress and settled into the study to copy the letters. Rowan explained the plan. She questioned the wisdom of trusting Redgrave, though she admitted that Langford knew how to keep secrets.
"When you meet Redgrave, you'll like him," Rowan said. "And you'll trust him." "I don't confuse liking with trust," Ophelia replied without looking up. "I trust Langford because I read his file."
Rowan looked at her, torn between amusement and alarm. "Compared to you, he led the life of an altar boy," she added with excessive innocence.
"Never tell him you read his dossier." "I wasn't planning to." "He bristled as much as you did." Before Rowan could reply, Silas appeared. His unease gave him away. "This place is isolated. Why hasn't anyone tried to reach you?" "They did," Ophelia replied casually.
Rowan filled in the account, 4 failed attempts in 10 days. Silas flared with anger.
"You knew and you didn't tell me. I didn't want to worry you."
Silas's anger faded when Ophelia interrupted gently. "Why don't you go see Edmund?"
"I'm sure he'd appreciate the company."
Before leaving, Rowan turned to her.
"Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks again." "I promise." He leaned down to kiss her.
Ophelia tried to dodge him.
"Silas is here."
"Ignore him." When he left, Ophelia stood motionless before the desk. "I love you," he had said.
The trembling in her hands took a long time to subside. It didn't matter if he loved her, she would still have to leave him.
Dinner was tense and oddly lively. Silas chose to stay with Edmund. Ophelia and Rowan argued with fervor and no small amount of irony about the separation of church and state, switching positions solely to contradict each other. Holling, an unwilling referee, ended up snatching the last portion of lamb from Rowan. A knock at the door interrupted the evening.
"I'll go," Rowan said.
"Be careful," Ophelia warned. 10 minutes later, Holling returned.
"So Redgrave and the Marquis of Langford Hall."
"My lord awaits them in the library, and with brandy." Ophelia rose slowly.
She smoothed her dress and smiled. "I'm not worried," she said. "I'm getting ready." "For what, milady?" "To look distressed."
"And weak." Holling didn't understand, but he opened the door. Ophelia entered with her head bowed, hands clasped like a helpless young woman. Redgrave stood at once. Langford watched her in bewilderment.
This was not the girl he knew.
"I will not judge you for your father's actions," Redgrave said with unexpected gentleness. "Can you tell us what happened from the time you arrived in London?" Ophelia nodded and began the account. The letters, her father's murder, the flight with Hale, the ambush against Silas and Edmund, the assassin's mistake in believing them dead, the role of the night watchman as scapegoat.
"The plan was simple," she concluded.
Edmund was meant to reach Rowan once he had recovered.
But Rowan decided to take revenge too soon. "It wasn't without reason," he interjected.
Ophelia shrugged, never losing her composure. Only then did Rowan grasp the scope of the scene. Ophelia was playing her hand, protecting them all with exactly the appearance expected of her. Vulnerable. Harmless. Convincing. And dangerously brilliant. Ophelia shrugged. Edmund had forced the night watchman to promise he would say nothing to Rowan. He feared rightly that his brother would attack at once. Edmund wanted to explain, to put the facts in order, to protect him even from the sickbed.
The night watchman agreed to calm him. "And you?"
Langford asked.
"Silas is my brother."
"I returned to England and settled on his property," Ophelia replied.
Some of the night watchman's men were watching over Rowan. There were attempts on his life.
"We decided to remove him from the pursuit." She then recounted the chain of incidents with restrained precision: the desecration of the graves, the shot in the half-light, the flight toward the house, the nighttime ransacking while she slept, the horse shot down on the road and the fall that could have killed her, the servant's disbelief, the house burned to its foundations. Then the carriage attacked, the blow to the head waking amid shattered wood. She walked.
She borrowed a horse at an inn.
She reached London.
For what purpose?
Langford asked.
For one alone, to take Rowan off the trail.
Rowan interrupted her with a look. He would explain the how later. Ophelia finished, without mentioning the night watchman. Redgrave, visibly shaken, slowly shook his head. Did you know Harcourt? She asked.
Yes.
We began together.
Then you will remember that the first letters said, for the good of England.
Later they changed.
For the good of the Covenant, Redgrave murmured. I saw it. The father refused, Rowan said. The other two killed him.
After that, Harcourt fell. Silence.
There are 3 Edwards in Harcourt's files, Ophelia added. Priors Terence and Claiborne.
Terence died 4 years ago.
How did the night watchman gain access to our files?
Redgrave exclaimed.
He did, Rowan said. And he protected us.
He then told of the attack at sea, the bodies thrown overboard, the sharks. Ophelia clenched her hands. That part was never an act.
Ambition, Redgrave said at last. Young saviours who believed themselves above England. And they stopped invoking her, Ophelia agreed.
Redgrave drew a deep breath. We will find the guilty. And let us be grateful that the night watchman is on our side.
He is honourable, Ophelia said calmly. Like almost all thieves.
Langford frowned. Did you read my file? Rowan did not answer. When Redgrave concluded the questioning, he embraced Ophelia. She accepted the gesture, then leaned for a moment against Langford.
Thank you, she said.
Give Lydia my regards.
She left.
Before closing the door, Rowan called after her.
What was all this about? You said a man's pride suffers when he is deceived, she replied, smiling.
If others were deceived as well, and they were respected legends, the blow hurts less. Rowan understood.
He winked at her. I'll gather Edmund and Silas.
The door closed.
What did she mean?
Redgrave asked.
A personal matter, Rowan said.
Langford took a sip.
She's beautiful. Too shy, perhaps.
Rowan laughed.
Do you still think she's shy?
Redgrave cut in.
Promise me something.
When all this is over, I want to meet the night watchman. Rowan leaned back, satisfied.
You already have, sir.
Chapter 51. The face behind the name. Ophelia, come back here, Rowan ordered. Silence was answer enough.
He called Holling.
The butler appeared at once, rigid as an edict.
The young lady heard your call, my lord. She has declined. Bring her, Rowan said. By any means.
Holling obeyed. Langford meanwhile was smiling. Redgrave remained stunned.
I should have guessed, Langford murmured. Far too much shyness. This is no time, Redgrave cut in. This is serious.
Ophelia entered then, serene.
I was looking for Silas and Edmund. What's going on? You give them back. Excuse me. You know very well what you did. Rowan, she replied with sharpened sweetness, raising your voice in front of guests is in very poor taste. They know who you are. Oh. The night watchman.
Ophelia's surprise was theatrical.
You could have waited until I'd left. You're not leaving. Good Lord.
Redgrave exclaimed.
Is it true? No, Ophelia said. Yes, Rowan said. Can't you keep a secret? She turned to leave.
Give them back, Rowan insisted.
Why? They're my friends. If I can't steal from your friends, then from whom?
The blow landed cleanly. Ophelia added, looking at Langford.
I keep my word.
Rowan took a deep breath. Go on with your work, he conceded.
But everything you steal I will return. She went pale. That's absurd. It's inevitable. I swapped them, Ophelia said. May I go? He nodded. But not from this house, Rowan added. If you do, I'll come after you. The door slammed shut. Remarkable temperament, Rowan said, satisfied. Redgrave, have you recovered? Barely. It comforts me to know I wasn't the only one deceived.
Silas and Edmund entered then. Langford pulled out his watch and laughed.
I believe this is yours, Redgrave. She hugged us both. So that's why you called her, Redgrave said. No, Rowan admitted. But I knew she was up to something. She's not usually so affectionate. She drove you mad, Silas said. She made me fall in love, Rowan corrected. God help you, Langford smiled. When's the wedding? There will be one, Edmund declared. There will, Rowan said. First I have to convince her. Kneel.
Silas joked.
Not before her.
Before Black Hail, perhaps. Rowan was already moving toward the door.
You explain who Hail is.
I'm going after Ophelia. In the yard, the dappled mare was missing.
3 men followed her, they reported.
Rowan mounted bareback.
He tracked her to the stream.
Ophelia heard the hooves and fled toward the woods.
She didn't get far.
Rowan scooped her up at the gallop, secured her in front of him, and turned back.
The hunt was over. Chapter 52. The price of looking straight ahead.
Ophelia heard the hooves and plunged into the forest.
She didn't get far.
Rowan caught up with her at a gallop, lifted her without slowing, and turned the horse back toward the house.
They did not exchange a single word.
Holling was waiting for them. Rowan gave curt orders without looking at her.
To the bedroom.
Double guard at the door and beneath the windows. Only when he returned to the library did he allow the fury to loosen into a brief smile.
I found her, he said to Silas. Bring me up to date.
They spoke of letters and names well into the night. Redgrave and Langford resisted retiring. The director took copies of the documents, convinced they still concealed truths. No one contradicted him. Rowan went straight to Ophelia's bedroom. He dismissed the guards and entered without a sound. She was in bed, reading.
She didn't look up. You need more light, he said. And fire. It's cold.
Silence.
Pretending I'm not here won't change anything. Like returning everything I steal, she replied without looking at him.
Rowan lit candles, stoked the hearth. In the firelight his figure became almost unreal, shirt open, sleeves rolled up, the contained calm of someone who knows how to command and protect. Ophelia watched him from the corner of her eye, and thought with a knot in her chest, that he was the most attractive and most dangerous man she had ever known.
He turned and smiled at her with a tenderness that disarmed her.
Ophelia felt the vertigo. To desire him was to expose herself to losing him. Fear iced her from within.
My dear, are you all right? I'm just cold. Come here, she asked. To the bed.
Rowan did not yield.
He took another blanket and tucked her in carefully. Better. Thank you. I want to ask you some questions. You'd be more comfortable from the bed.
He sat in the chair, propped his feet on the mattress.
This is fine.
Ophelia sighed. She needed his embrace, he offered patience. When he began asking about the files, she gathered her strength so as not to lose herself in his smile. Did you read the Edwards?
They're not our Edwards. Will you answer me? Yes.
Did you read the files?
Yes.
Do you want the facts? A knock at the door interrupted them. Silas peeked in, sleepless.
He took in the scene and frowned. What are you doing here? We're talking, Rowan said. What do you need?
Silas stepped closer to the fire. He was barefoot, shirtless, the scars on his back spoke for him. Ophelia offered him Rowan's robe. Silas accepted and sat.
I want to ask my sister.
The door remained open. Redgrave appeared in a robe, surprised and amused at once.
I couldn't sleep, he confessed. The Covenant has all of us on edge.
Rowan pulled up a chair for him. Silas went to fetch Langford. Ophelia, aware of her nightgown, suggested moving to the library.
This is fine, Rowan said. Tell us about the files. Only the essentials, Redgrave asked.
Tomorrow we'll read everything in London. Ophelia settled among the pillows and began with Terence, the deceased one. The reactions were disbelief at first, urgency after. Langford and Redgrave interrupted to clarify missions, names, dates. The account grew like a dark tide, the Covenant, the shadows of the state, the Edwards used as expendable pieces. When she finished, it was dawn. Ophelia yawned, exhausted.
Enough for today, Redgrave decided. We'll continue tomorrow.
They were leaving when Ophelia called to the director.
What if the Edward they're looking for isn't among those three?
Redgrave turned back.
This is a beginning, he said calmly. We'll cross-check everything. We'll get to the bottom of it.
The door closed. The fire sank to embers. Rowan looked at Ophelia without speaking. Between them the silence was no longer a truce, but a dangerous promise.
Chapter 53.
No one comes out clean.
Isn't there a chance they're dead?
Ophelia asked.
The hope in her voice made the answer weigh on Redgrave. I'm afraid not.
Someone wants those letters.
At least one member of the Covenant is still alive.
When they were alone, Ophelia felt the weariness crash over her like a tide. She wanted nothing but the shelter of Rowan's arms. She pulled back the blankets, a silent invitation. Rowan came closer, brushed her lips with a chaste kiss, and extinguished the candles.
Good night, my dear.
The door closed. Ophelia stared into the darkness, incredulous. She rejected the cruelest thought. No, he had not stopped loving her, and clung to a reasonable explanation. The day had been long for both of them.
She slept poorly. The night became an abyss.
She woke sobbing and by pure instinct, reached for Rowan.
He wasn't there. She couldn't stay.
The starless night pushed her to decide. She left her room wrapped in the silence of the corridor, aware of the discreet presence of the guard watching her without asking questions. She said nothing when she crossed the threshold of Rowan's room. She simply entered, like someone seeking shelter before dawn erases what remains of the night. She closed the door behind her, leaving her doubts behind, and walked into the half-light that awaited her. Rowan woke when the door closed. In the dimness he smiled.
I don't know how to dance, Ophelia announced, as if it were a grave confession. I don't know how to sew either. She approached the bed.
He pulled back the covers. Ophelia slipped out of her nightgown and curled up beside him. Rowan wrapped his arms around her.
The trembling subsided.
She fell asleep safe before hearing a reply.
At dawn he woke her to love her.
Then, drifting in and out of sleep, Ophelia heard words of love. Later, close to midday, Rowan gently shook her awake. Ophelia refused, tried to draw him back again, until she opened her eyes and saw Holling at the foot of the bed. She covered herself, blushing.
Oh, Holling, are you ashamed of me? Not at all, milady, the butler replied. I assume my master dragged you here. By the hair?
Rowan asked flatly.
I wouldn't rule it out. That's exactly how it was, Ophelia confirmed. And don't tell anyone.
Holling smiled.
There's no one left to tell. Redgrave and Langford. They know. It wasn't me, Rowan said. You left the door open. They saw your bed empty.
Ophelia wanted to disappear beneath the blankets.
Why is my silverware under the bed?
Rowan asked.
For safety, Holling explained. One of your guests showed excessive affection for it.
Milady suggested a discreet place. Rowan laughed.
Get dressed.
Redgrave wants to keep questioning you. Holling stayed. There were new dresses in the wardrobe, sent by the Duchess. He chose an ivory one, sober and elegant. He also left, with studied discretion, the undergarments at the foot of the bed. 15 minutes later, Ophelia was ready. The cook braided her hair with rough efficiency.
You look a picture.
Ophelia thanked her.
She couldn't delay it any longer.
When she opened the door, 2 guards were posted in the corridor. They went down with her. In the dining room, everyone stood. Ophelia went straight to Rowan. He kissed her on the forehead. Silas broke the silence.
Rowan, get your hands off her. My mouth doesn't count as hands, Rowan replied.
He kissed her again, just to provoke him. Ophelia sat down, sighing, aware that the day had only just begun. Chapter 54.
The laughter that hides fear.
While the men continued the discussion, Holling made sure Ophelia had breakfast. Redgrave presided at one end of the table, Rowan at the other. When Ophelia's plate was cleared, Redgrave cleared his throat. They had waited for her to finish.
We have decided you will come to London with us, he announced. There will be strict security.
His gaze went straight to Rowan.
Then he took out pen and paper. I need to question you while taking notes. Why London?
Ophelia asked.
The archive room.
If I request the keys by day, there will be a record.
At night there won't. Without keys, Edmund added. You said you'd already been inside, Redgrave reminded her. 3 times, Ophelia corrected. The director went pale. Is our security that weak? No, Rowan intervened. It's excellent.
Ophelia blushed to spite herself.
The Covenant must already know, she said. They sent men here. None returned, Langford clarified. How? Rowan took care of it.
Ophelia looked at him, alarmed.
Did you kill them? No. He doesn't do those things anymore, she added firmly. He's retired.
Langford nodded. Ophelia's smile was brief but sincere. In London you can stay with Lydia and me, Edmund proposed.
Rowan will go to his house. No, Rowan said. She'll stay with me. Think of the scandal. 1 witness is enough, Edmund murmured. I said no. The tone ended the discussion.
Ophelia took a second to grasp the scope of it. Holling, ever timely, patted her hand.
Look on the bright side, milady. No need to announce it in the newspapers.
Ophelia shot him a glare. Holling smiled like someone who had already moved invisible pieces. When Ophelia stepped out for more tea, Holling spoke.
Your guests will arrive in half an hour. Guests?
Edmund and Silas protested.
I didn't invite anyone, Rowan said, amused. Holling, enlighten us.
Your parents, Ophelia's uncle, and someone else. For the ceremony. Silence.
A license?
Rowan asked.
Ready since you signed the application. She'll argue, Silas warned. I'll persuade her.
Holling set an unloaded pistol on the table. Didn't you suggest aiming at the bride's back, Sir Redgrave? Laughter broke out just as Ophelia returned. No one explained anything to her.
She decided it was an improper joke. Pack, Rowan told her. We're leaving soon.
Ophelia obeyed, bewildered. Shortly after, now alone, Black Hale appeared with a bouquet of white roses.
For you, girl. What are you doing here? Today's a special day.
Rowan should dress like me.
Why? My shirt matches your dress.
Ophelia frowned. Hale was nervous. Too nervous.
Rowan asked me to marry you, he blurted out. Properly. Said he'd kneel if necessary. And what did you say? That I would.
He waited for an explosion.
It didn't come.
Ophelia sat down and set the flowers aside.
Aren't you angry? No. Then. I'm afraid, uncle.
Hale was struck dumb.
Then he slowly shook his head. I've never seen you afraid of anything.
He sat beside her, awkward and protective, and put an arm around her. Ophelia rested her head on his shoulder, the roses crushed between them as if the future already weighed too much. Chapter 55. The peace that is not innocent. Ophelia tried to explain to Hale why everything was different now, but she couldn't find the right words.
It wasn't fear, or not only that.
She had been afraid before too many times. What terrified her was the certainty that by accepting Rowan, her former life would close forever. Hale, practical as ever, spoke of retiring, of handing command to Silas, of a future that moved forward without asking permission. For him, change was natural. For Ophelia, it was a quiet loss.
She didn't feel ready. Not to be a wife, not to take a place she didn't know if she deserved.
She tried to explain that she wasn't the woman Rowan believed he wanted.
That she would make mistakes. That she didn't know how to sew, or dance, or fulfill what was expected of a lady.
Hale listened with clumsy patience, with that rough affection he had never known how to disguise, and reminded her without quite saying it that she had survived far worse things. When Ophelia confessed that she had always wanted to belong, Hale didn't understand it as she had hoped. To him, she had always had a place. Only later did he grasp that Ophelia was speaking of something else, not a crew nor a refuge, but a life that wouldn't collapse at the first mistake.
That was when Ophelia convinced herself she needed time.
A year. A long engagement. Enough time to learn, or for Rowan to realize he had been wrong. Convinced this was the only way out, she ran to speak with him.
She didn't arrive in time. The drawing room was full.
Too full. Family, acquaintances, expectant faces. Ophelia understood everything at once, with brutal clarity. Hale caught her arm when her legs gave way.
There would be no year of waiting. The wedding was now.
Rowan approached before she could react. His face was stern resolve. There was no trace of doubt in him, only implacable determination. He gave her a choice. The easy way, walk to the minister and speak the vows.
The hard way, he left no doubt he would drag her if necessary.
It wasn't cruelty that froze her, but the deepest fear of all, abandonment. Ophelia understood that if she didn't yield, she would lose everything.
That if she fled, this time there would be no return. She accepted. Not because she lacked will, but because she was using it to survive once more.
As they walked toward the minister, supported by Hale, Ophelia looked at no one. When the moment came, she spoke her vows in a low but steady voice. Rowan did not let her hide at the end. He lifted her face and forced her to look at him. And in that gesture, hard, possessive, irrevocable, was sealed not only the marriage, but the true nature of the bond they had just created. Chapter 56.
A chosen life.
Ophelia was the first to speak the vows, a deliberate break with the tradition Rowan had imposed. Her voice trembled slightly at the beginning, but it did not break. She kept her gaze lowered as she repeated the ritual words, as if she needed to cling to them in order not to flee. Rowan did not take his eyes off her for a single moment.
He waited.
Only when Ophelia reached the end of the litany did he lift her chin with 2 fingers, and force her to look at him. The expression on the young woman's face pierced his chest, vulnerable, frightened, with restrained tears shining in her eyes. In that instant, he understood the magnitude of what he had done. He loved her with an almost feral intensity, but love was not enough. He would have to earn her trust step by step. The pastor closed the book with a tense gesture, unfolded the paper Rowan had given him, and began to read, clearing his throat beforehand. Do you promise to remain by your wife's side, for as long as you live? Do you give your word before God and these witnesses, that you will never abandon her until death parts you? Ophelia opened her eyes in astonishment, and looked at the document the minister was holding. She did not recognize those words. They were not the usual ones.
"I promise," Rowan said in a steady voice, never taking his eyes off her. "And now the last one." "This is highly irregular," the pastor murmured, uncomfortable, before turning to Ophelia. "And you?
Do you promise to tell your husband that you love him before this day is over?" The smile that spread across Ophelia's face was unexpected, radiant, almost a relief.
"I promise." "You may kiss the bride," announced the minister.
Rowan obeyed, without hesitation. He kissed her with restraint, but with a possession he did not hide. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers and murmured for her ears alone,
"You are mine now."
He drew her tightly against his chest.
"I never make the same mistake twice, my dear." "I don't understand,"
Ophelia whispered, still on the verge of tears.
"Why didn't you make me promise not to leave you?"
Rowan shook his head gently. "Because I know that when you give your word you won't break it.
And because that promise only matters if it is born of your own will.
When you are ready, you will give it to me."
There was no more time for explanations.
The guests drew near, congratulations shattered the moment. In a corner, Hale was wiping his eyes with clumsy discretion, surrounded by his men. Elysia, Rowan's mother, watched Ophelia with calm satisfaction, unaware of the true story of her new daughter-in-law.
"Will your uncle visit often?"
Elysia asked, measuring Hale with caution.
"He lives far from England," Ophelia replied. "Perhaps once a year."
Rowan caught the last phrase, and burst out laughing when he saw the immediate relief on his mother's face. "My mother gets nervous around your uncle."
"There's no need," Ophelia replied sincerely. "Hale is a kind man. Perhaps if you knew him better."
The suggestion left Elysia so taken aback that she didn't know how to respond. Rowan smiled with obvious amusement.
"That was exactly Hale's idea," he added. "To get to know her very well."
Ophelia did not understand the horror on the Duchess's face, nor why Rowan seemed to be enjoying himself so much.
"Were you worried about not belonging to the family?" he whispered later, drawing close. "We all need to belong to someone," Ophelia replied honestly. "Even you."
Hale approached then and tossed her the bouquet. "Enjoy them, girl.
They'll be the last roses Jem steals for you."
He kissed her on the forehead, and immediately dragged Rowan away to talk about plans, ships, and a vessel that was supposed to be ready the next day. Ophelia took the opportunity to approach Silas, who was alone on the terrace.
They spoke for a long while.
When she took a white rose from the bouquet and offered it to him, the young man first shook his head, then nodded. He accepted it and hugged her tightly. From a distance, Rowan watched the scene with interest. For the first time he saw Silas without defenses, his affection laid bare.
"What was that?" he asked when Ophelia returned. "A wedding gift. A rose." "My name," she clarified. "Now Silas is the night watchman again."
Rowan blinked.
"Wasn't the night watchman dead with you?" "Only for a while. He has unfinished business." "What business?"
Ophelia smiled, delighted by his confusion.
"Going to fetch his wife. Silas is married. Since he was 14. By order of the king."
Rowan burst out laughing.
"And her. She ran away." "I'm starting to understand his character," he admitted.
Sir Redgrave interrupted them then, to remind them that they needed to depart for London.
"You'd better put on your riding clothes," Rowan said. "We won't be going by carriage."
Ophelia nodded. She went upstairs with her heart still racing, aware that the wedding was over, but not its consequences.
Chapter 57. The night breaks.
Rowan was putting on his jacket when Ophelia appeared in the doorway. She was already wearing her riding trousers and boots. The white shirt was still open at the collar, no cravat. He looked ready for flight, rather than for a wedding night.
I'm ready, she said.
Rowan gave a brief, humorless smile.
This isn't how I imagined starting our marriage. We could have waited. He shook his head slowly. No. Not now.
As he fastened his belt and slid the knife into his boot, he explained the detour, the forest, the reverse path, the discreet entry into London. No carriages, no drawing attention. Ophelia listened with a learned calm.
Like McCrae, she remarked, almost distracted.
Rowan looked up.
Who? The man who gave me the lashings.
The answer was so plain it chilled his blood. Ophelia said it, as one might mention an old storm. She added that Hale had taken care of the matter, that it happened when she was 8 or 9, that it had been a useful lesson. Never let yourself be surprised by someone behind you, bold. Rowan did not answer at once.
He turned toward the wardrobe to hide his face.
When he spoke, his voice was steady, too controlled.
Did he leave you alone often? All the time, she replied. Until I was old enough to go with him. That childhood had nothing of childhood in it.
Rowan clenched his fists and took a deep breath.
Come here.
Ophelia did as she was told.
He held her by the shoulders. I want you to remember something else, he said. I love you.
She smiled softly and brushed his cheek.
That I don't forget. She tried to kiss him, but Rowan shook his head. And one more thing. Promise me you'll never go back to sea again.
Ophelia opened her eyes, surprised.
I didn't promise you that. Do it now. She hesitated only a moment. I promise.
Rowan nodded, satisfied. He explained that Hale would have to visit her in England, that there would be no voyages, that he would take the blame if necessary. Ophelia understood then that he had known for a long time, the nightmares, the terror of water, the fear she had never confessed.
Do you think I'm a coward? She asked quietly.
If I had been through what you went through, he replied, not even Poseidon himself would drag me back to the sea. She laughed and cried at once, released. She spoke of Silas, of his apparent strength, of his inevitable return to the waves. She even confessed in secret that her brother got seasick. Rowan laughed openly for the first time.
A model pirate.
It was then that Ophelia, hiding her face in his jacket, said it.
I love you.
Rowan pretended not to hear her. He lifted her chin and made her repeat it.
It took effort. A great deal.
When she managed it, the tears came back.
I don't know how to say these things, she admitted. I never liked them.
Rowan kissed her with restrained tenderness.
The first time you made love, you didn't like that either, he reminded her with gentle irony.
Sir Redgrave's interruption saved them from themselves.
They sighed together, took each other's hand and went downstairs.
In the vestibule, Langford and Redgrave were no longer joking. The forest received them in silence. Thomas and Jem were waiting with the horses. Rowan went first, Ophelia followed, Langford covered their rear, Redgrave brought up the end. The vigilance was constant. Rowan checked tracks, doubled back, made sure no one was following them.
It did not trouble Ophelia, he was protecting her.
Each time Rowan moved away, Langford stayed with her and spoke of his archive, of truth as the only defense. Amused, Ophelia suggested stealing it. He rejected the idea with severe ethics. By the time they reached the outskirts of London, the sun was setting. Ophelia was exhausted. Rowan lifted her onto the horse and settled her between his arms.
She did not protest.
During the final stretch, she thought that this man, so watchful, so unyielding, so steady, was someone a woman could lean on.
And for the first time in a long while, she was not afraid. Chapter 58.
Learning to stay. When they arrived at the city house, Ophelia was barely able to stay awake. Rowan went in first, ordered the servants to withdraw, and led her to the library. The smell of the recent fire still lingered in the air, blackened walls, scorched wood, but the house had been brought back to life with quiet efficiency.
It would suffice.
Langford and Sir Redgrave joined them there.
They spoke in low voices.
Redgrave wanted to leave as soon as night fell. Ophelia, without dramatizing, corrected the plan. Until midnight there would be 2 guards.
After that, only one.
A specific man. A drinker. Predictable. Redgrave looked at her as if he had just discovered a moral crack in the edifice of the state. Ophelia simply shrugged. Foresight was also a form of discipline. They then discussed locks. The back one, Ophelia said, was excellent. Difficult, but not impossible. She knew because she had entered it herself. The first time had taken her minutes, the inner refuge nearly an hour. Redgrave preferred not to hear any more. While the men refined their plans, Ophelia went to the kitchen. She returned with simple food: hard bread, cheese, cold lamb, apples, dark beer. She removed her boots, curled up by the fire, and fell asleep. Hours later she woke. Rowan was rereading the copied letters, absorbed, his concentration making his face taut. When he looked up he smiled. Something had clicked.
"It's coming," he said, without explaining.
Ophelia, with almost insolent confidence, informed the others that her husband was logical to the extreme and, moreover, confident. Langford laughed. Redgrave nodded. Rowan accepted the verdict, without defending himself. Ophelia decided that, coming from him, this was an honor. The fatigue from the ride settled in her body. She admitted it, without complaint. Langford praised her. He spoke of a future reception. Rowan observed, amused, that Lydia and Ophelia would resemble each other more than anyone suspected. Ophelia, enthusiastic, asked if Lydia also stole.
No. But she could teach her many other things.
Rowan invoked God with contained irony. Ophelia changed. Black dress, dark cloak, tightly fitted hood, her hair must not betray her.
They traveled almost on foot through the city.
The carriage dropped them halfway. The alley behind the War Office smelled of damp and ancient stone. Ophelia stopped.
There was light where it shouldn't be.
Not at the entrance, but in the inner office. Rowan understood immediately.
If someone were coming out, it would be through the back door.
Redgrave decided to follow alone. Langford was to stay. No arguments. They waited in the shadows. Rowan wrapped an arm around Ophelia. She rested her forehead on his chest. She did not want to fall behind, but neither did she want to see him enter unnecessary danger. Langford, she thought, knew how to kill without hesitation.
That was enough. The door creaked.
2 men came out. Ophelia recognized them instantly and stifled an exclamation. Rowan's hand sealed her mouth.
She watched them disappear.
Redgrave followed. Then Ophelia spoke, barely a whisper.
"The security is deplorable."
"Yes," Rowan replied.
"You know them?"
She nodded. They were the same men who had wrecked Silas's carriage. One of them had also struck her on the head. Nothing more needed to be known.
Chapter 59. The light that remains.
Rowan's gesture alarmed her. For a moment, Ophelia thought he might chase after them without thinking of the consequences.
"Rowan, please," she whispered. "Be logical. You can't go after them now." "I'll wait," he replied, tense. "But when this is over." He didn't finish the threat. He took her hand and led her to the back door.
The lock yielded in seconds under the old tool Hale had given her on her 10th birthday. The second one barely resisted. They entered silently. Langford cleared the way. Ophelia stepped forward without asking. They went up the service staircase. On the second flight, she avoided the 4th step with a precise gesture. It still creaked. She felt Langford's hands on her waist. She turned to give him a brief grateful smile. The guard was not asleep at the desk in the outer office. He was dead. The knife handle protruded between his shoulders. Ophelia stepped back immediately. Rowan instinctively covered her mouth, but she did not scream.
She just watched.
Two shadows moved behind the glass of the inner door. Rowan gently pushed her into a corner and entered with Langford.
The wait was the worst.
Ophelia pressed her back against the cold wall, fingers interlaced tightly. She thought of Rowan, of the absurd certainty that she wouldn't know what to do if something happened to him.
She closed her eyes.
When a hand touched her shoulder, she opened them sharply.
"It's done," he murmured. "We're alone."
Inside, the two men lay unconscious in a corner. Ophelia exhaled in relief. "Killing was forbidden," she said firmly.
"It always has been." "And it was respected," Rowan replied.
Langford located Terence's file and smiled satisfied. Ophelia urged them on with a sharp gesture.
This was no time for commentary.
They worked for hours. Ophelia stayed on guard, standing without rest. When Rowan closed the last drawer, she swapped the files with the precision of a professional, and blew out the candles. They left unseen. In the alley, Sir Redgrave guided them to the carriage. Ophelia stumbled around the corner, and Langford lifted her in his arms for a moment. When he passed her to Rowan, Rowan already held the rear, watchful.
She hadn't noticed a thing.
She fell asleep clutching her cloak, the documents pressed to her chest. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself not to keep watch.
As long as Rowan was near, nothing could reach her. She woke in his bed. "Are they waiting downstairs?" she murmured, drowsy. "Yes." "Sleep," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I'll be back soon." "I don't want to need you," she confessed, almost in a whisper.
Rowan's smile was calm, certain.
"I know. And yet you do." The contradiction comforted her. She fell asleep without nightmares.
Rowan returned at dawn. He wrapped an arm around her and fell asleep immediately. By midday, Ophelia went down for breakfast. Minutes later, he appeared in the doorway, tousled, exhausted, his brow hardened.
"Come here." "Do you always get up like this?" she asked defiantly. "I thought you had left."
He lifted her in his arms without waiting for a response, and carried her upstairs.
She did not scream. She understood. "I didn't abandon you," he whispered. "I was just downstairs." "You're my wife," he said, as if he needed to remind himself.
He set her on the bed and lay beside her, holding her with a silent urgency. Ophelia did not laugh, she understood all too well the fear behind it.
They slept.
Later, when he woke in a better mood, she confronted him.
"You have to trust me." "It works both ways," he replied. "You said you'd leave me if it was necessary." They stopped on the last step, face to face. "I don't want to talk about that now," she said, holding back tears. "You're afraid," Rowan said gently. "Not of me."
"Of me being able to leave, like others did." Ophelia nodded, defeated.
"Yes. It makes me feel vulnerable."
Rowan sighed.
"Then we'll start there."
"How long do you think it will take you to lose that fear?"
Chapter 60. After the shadow.
Rowan's face remained serious, his voice controlled.
"How long do you think it will take you to get tired of me?"
Ophelia asked, fear showing without disguise.
"Never," he replied bluntly. "Now tell me, how long will you need to trust me?" "I love you," she said. "I gave you my vows."
"What more can I offer?" Panic cracked her voice. Rowan realized he was pushing her too far.
He drew her close.
The gesture was also to calm himself.
"When you tried to leave the first time," he finally said, "I felt something I didn't know, terror. And I hated it."
"I'm beginning to understand that you've lived like that since you were a child." Ophelia pressed her forehead to his chest.
"I learned to manage on my own," she admitted. "It's not logical, but it's who I am." "Then let's make it logical," Rowan suggested after a pause. "A term."
She pulled back, incredulous.
"A term. 6 months. Promise me you won't leave for 6 months." "You just said you'd never leave me." "And I won't." But you need a visible way out so the fear can calm.
She studied him for a long moment. She understood he was serious.
And you promise too? Of course.
Ophelia hugged him, smiling into his shoulder. The relief was immediate, almost physical.
No, he corrected. 6 months aren't enough.
A year. From the day of our wedding.
I promise.
Rowan exhaled, triumphant.
Say it properly. I will stay with you for a year. And I won't leave you in a year. He lifted her chin. Do you believe me? Yes. And are you relieved?
The certainty struck her like pure light. He would not leave.
He could not. I trust you, she whispered. I'm not afraid anymore.
He smiled, satisfied with his own logic.
Then I have fulfilled it.
They kissed without hurry. Ophelia trembled, but not with fear.
I'm hungry, she said at last, almost laughing. Such freedom makes an appetite. At breakfast, Rowan wanted to know everything. Tell me your adventures. You'll be angry. I won't. I have a talent for going where I shouldn't, she admitted. Hale said I was born a thief and a liar. He educated you far too well to be a barbarian, Rowan replied. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a lady.
Ophelia smiled, proud. Enjoy the deception, she explained.
To him, appearances are part of the game.
Rowan shook his head, amused.
Your uncle is a strategist. No, she corrected. He's an artist.
Rowan began to understand that Ophelia saw things that escaped him. It wasn't intelligence, or not just that, but a different kind of attention. While he organized facts, she seemed to listen to what had yet to be said. She paused a moment longer than necessary before responding, as if measuring not only the truth, but the moment when that truth should be spoken. It unsettled him. Rowan had learned to distrust grey areas. In his world, clarity was a virtue, proof, names, causes and consequences. Darkness was the enemy's terrain. Yet Ophelia moved through it without losing her balance. She didn't seem tempted by deception, but neither did she reject it, with the fervor of someone who had never needed it. There were nights when he watched her in silence, when he thought she slept, and he thought Ophelia never fully rested. She didn't watch, she guarded. As if even in repose she protected something invisible, something not yet ready to be revealed. That disarmed him. Rowan knew how to hunt. He could follow a trail to its end, even when it turned unpleasant. But Ophelia didn't pursue the truth, she circled it. She waited. And when she finally spoke, she did so with a precision that admitted no reply. Rowan did not insist. Not because he was satisfied, but because he understood that pressing her would be useless. Ophelia didn't conceal out of malice, but out of respect for the process. And that posed an uncomfortable question. What if not all truth needed to be forced? To love her meant accepting that there were paths he could not walk with her. That his sense of order did not always align with Ophelia's, even though in essence they defended the same things. He protected the light with rules. She had learned to move through the night without breaking it. That drew him. And it forced him to watch himself. Because if Ophelia was made of fertile darkness, then he had to wonder if his hunter's trade risked destroying what was still growing. And for the first time since they met, Rowan understood that the real danger was not that Ophelia was hiding something, but that he still didn't know how to wait. Chapter 61. The hunt reversed. Ophelia kept talking about her uncle, and some memorable escapades. Rowan listened in silence, keeping his promise not to get angry, though by the end his hands trembled with a very unchivalrous impulse toward old Hale. He decided that his wife's past was a territory to be navigated with caution. I think it's better to pace these stories, he said at last. One a month should be enough. At this rate, I'll be grey before winter.
I'll tell them one by one, she replied innocently, accepting a tray of biscuits. I mean 1 per month. You promised not to get angry.
Rowan leaned back in the chair.
Change of subject. Tell me when you started loving me. Did I force it?
Ophelia laughed.
That's impossible. I think it happened when I read your file.
He blinked, incredulous.
Really?
You were firm, methodical, and you never abandoned your own. Then I met you, and you finished stealing my heart.
Now tell me yours. During one of our arguments, we were shouting at each other. Still an argument. She smiled at his frankness.
Then they talked about Holling, the gruff but loyal butler, a shipwreck, and a swimming lesson delivered with a push or two. They laughed together. Later, Ophelia grew serious.
What conclusion did you reach last night?
Rowan explained without beating around the bush. Wilton, the Covenant, Terence dead, the code name Frost, Oxford, the possibility it was a foreigner. Pieces were missing, but not the certainty that he would find them.
Don't leave this house, he said when he finished. Neither will you, she replied. Agreed.
Ophelia raised an eyebrow.
And how shall we amuse ourselves? We could read.
She moved behind him, wrapping her arms around him.
Or learn to embroider, she whispered, with an irony too sweet to be believed.
Do you know what I really want?
I have an idea. Will you teach me what you know? Everything I know. He took her hand. And music. We'll make our own.
They went upstairs laughing. In the parlor, Rowan closed the door and began teaching her to dance. Ophelia learned quickly, though she could never display that lesson in society. Had she done so, all of London would have been scandalized. The day passed between laughter and knowing silences.
But when night fell, the first quarrel arrived.
And curiously, that too confirmed that they were learning to be two.
Chapter 62. The hidden name. What do you mean you're leaving?
Exclaimed Ophelia as she saw Rowan take his jacket.
We agreed you wouldn't go out. I'll be careful, Rowan interrupted, kissing her forehead. Langford and Redgrave are waiting.
It will be like this every night until it's over.
Now tell me you won't wait up for me. I will wait, she said. I know, he sighed. Still tell me you won't.
Ophelia followed him to the back door.
Do you remember McCrae?
Rowan stopped, hand on the knob.
That lesson is yours, she said. You could teach it to me too. Very well, he yielded. I'll remember McCrae.
He opened the door but turned to look at her again.
Will you be here when I return?
The question both angered and disarmed her.
I will be here, she answered, without reproach.
Those words became a nightly ritual. He would leave, reminding her of the warning. She promised to wait. In those hours of wakefulness, Ophelia thought of Rowan's vulnerability. It didn't just stem from her, but from a harsh childhood, a hostile mother, loyalties forged early through blows. She realized then that he needed her as much as she needed him, and that realization brought relief. Lady Brierley insisted on seeing her. Rowan claimed indisposition, until the old lady decided to come in person. Ophelia felt a pang of guilt when she saw her, fragile, still elegant, eyes clear, tenderness intact.
They had tea in the parlor.
Lady Brierley spoke of Silas, of Edmund, of newspapers, of duty. Rowan answered with sober precision. Ophelia performed her role as grieving sister with dignity.
How ironic, the lady remarked, that you ended up together. Not so much, Rowan said. Absence brought us together.
Ophelia smiled. Lady Brierley spoke of the past, of Ophelia's father, of a possible guardianship never granted. Ophelia listened, answered carefully, hiding truths on her husband's advice. She lied gracefully, and Rowan watched her with a new respect. She also knew how to deceive when necessary.
Don't you keep anything of your father's? The old woman asked. Not a single letter. Nothing, Ophelia replied. You're forgetting the chest, Rowan intervened softly.
Ophelia looked at him for a moment, puzzled but played along.
Ah yes. The chest.
Lady Brierly seemed relieved. She declined to accompany them to see it, and left shortly after. When the door closed, Ophelia turned to Rowan.
I didn't like lying to her, she said. Why did you invent a chest?
Rowan smiled, satisfied.
It was a necessary lie. You said none are necessary. Explain first why it pains you, he replied. Then I'll explain the plan.
Ophelia crossed her arms, determined.
It better be a good plan, husband.
Or I'll give you a reprimand you won't forget. And for the first time in days, political intrigue was set aside for something equally dangerous, a wife beginning to demand the whole truth. Chapter 63. The woman they called Frost. Ophelia's shocked expression briefly reminded him of Uncle Hale. Rowan laughed and pulled her into his arms.
Well, she murmured against his jacket. Explain to me why you lied to a good family friend. She's not a friend, he replied curtly. She killed your father.
Silence fell like a blow. Ophelia looked up, incredulous.
She shook her head slowly.
Rowan nodded. Her legs gave way.
He held her and led her to the sofa. Are you telling me, she whispered, that Lady Brierly is Frost? It can't be, she gasped. She's a woman. And that makes her incapable of killing.
Ophelia closed her eyes. Rowan wrapped his arms around her shoulders.
It's logical, he said calmly. When I reread the letters, I realized my mistake.
I assumed Frost was a man. With the Night Guardian, I didn't repeat that error.
You're always proud to say that, she murmured, catching her breath. Convince me.
Did you ever think Frost could be a woman?
She sighed, resigned. No. Thank you.
She shook her head, still trembling.
Frost tried to kill us. She threatened, he corrected. And remember, she was upset about her code name.
Few men would have cared. Ophelia frowned. The logic was starting to fall into place. Brierly hired all the staff at Silas's house, Rowan continued.
They were hers.
They ransacked the estate looking for something.
And Hawthorne. I never trusted him, Ophelia interrupted. He tried to force me to drink tea. Hawthorne erased evidence.
Wilton killed the horse. They even dug in your parents' grave.
They were looking for the letters.
Horror gave way to bitter clarity.
And the trips. Frequent to France, right in the middle of the war. Too many for a lady without a cause.
Ophelia looked at him, almost smiling despite her fear.
I'm married to a dangerous man. Intelligent, he corrected. I haven't told Redgrave or Langford yet. Tonight I will. What finally gave her away? She asked if you could read. And she showed too much interest in what your father left you.
Ophelia slumped her shoulders.
Hawthorne saw me reading for weeks. He must have told her.
Rowan's smile faded.
Then she knows you lied.
Ophelia took his hand.
What will you do?
Rowan remained silent for a moment. He was not a man to leave loose ends.
Close the trap, he said finally. And do it fast. She nodded.
She knew that once again the storm was in motion, and that he would move toward it without looking back. Chapter 64.
The hunter does not rest.
Rowan was not a man to leave his flanks exposed.
We'll compare the handwriting once we have the Cordelia letters, he said. Then there will be no doubt.
Ophelia mentioned Lady Brierly's notes.
The handwriting hadn't seemed familiar to her. She didn't write them, Rowan replied. Too careful for that.
Ophelia hinted at stealing them.
He was blunt. I want you to stay here.
Day and night.
It wasn't a request.
The storm was approaching, and conclusive evidence for a court was still missing. She promised to obey in exchange for knowing the plan. Rowan spoke of Wilton, the time had come to pressure him. Ophelia tried to joke about her own death in London. Rowan gave her a soft smile, no need to burn the ship. He already knew who Frost was.
And she would not stop pursuing them.
They embraced. They reminded each other, as always, to be careful. Then came intimacy, brief, intense, and at nightfall the ritual. He left, she promised to wait.
But Rowan did not return.
The premonition was immediate, old, certain. Ophelia dressed quickly, hid a dagger, secured the house.
Knocks came at the door shortly after.
Then shattered glass. The note appeared in the guard's hands, familiar handwriting. Frost.
She had 1 hour.
Lathmere Street. Ophelia did not go. She sent the men to look for Rowan and locked the doors.
She knew it could be a trap.
She also knew it might already be too late. Footsteps climbed the stairs. Ophelia took Rowan's pistol and waited, motionless. When the voice ordered a candle lit, she fired.
The first fell. The others didn't take long. She fought. She wounded. But there were 3.
The blow to her jaw plunged her into darkness. She woke in a damp warehouse lit by candles. Stacked baskets. Bare stone.
And at the far end, dressed in white, Lady Brierly. Now I understand your name, Ophelia said, her voice broken. You have no soul. The slap was sharp. Where are the letters? Safe.
Brierly laughed. She spoke of the Covenant, of England, of a power that could have ruled the country.
Of her misunderstood genius.
Ophelia understood with absolute coldness that there was no possible reason. If I return the letters, she asked, will you leave my husband alone? The answer was a gesture of contempt. Ophelia lifted her chin, bleeding but firm.
Then listen carefully, she said. Release Rowan and you'll get what you're looking for.
The war, she realized, was no longer secret.
And it had just begun.
Chapter 65.
What was saved?
Brierly turned to one of her men.
Lock our guest in the back room. Then she looked at Ophelia with a glacial smile. You'll be my bait.
Rowan will come.
He'll die. After handing over the letters, of course. And you'll die too, my dear.
Slowly. Your father was the true traitor, he turned his back on me. On me. Her voice grew almost sing-song.
You'll make up for all my losses.
Ophelia felt a relief so intense it nearly made her collapse. Rowan was not captive. He would come for her. The danger remained, but he was free.
She smiled as they led her to confinement. They didn't tie her up.
A fatal mistake. She whimpered, cried, let herself fall to the center of the room when the door closed.
She waited.
Listened to the footsteps fade. Then she assessed the space, a window too high, a useless desk. Exactly what they believed was sufficient. She pulled the special hair clasp free and knelt at the lock.
It took longer than usual.
Urgency made her clumsy. When she finally stepped into the corridor, the darkness was complete. She moved silently, reached the street, and ran in the wrong direction.
The terror was absolute.
Praying, gasping, she promised the Creator everything she could think of, not to lie, not to steal, never to curse again. When the pain in her side eased, she understood, with a thread of irony, that this last promise had been the decisive one.
She kept running.
When she reached the street of the house, she hid in the shadows. She saw Brierly's men carrying the litter. Then she knew Rowan was already there.
The shout decided her. Where is she?
The anguish in Rowan's voice pierced her chest. Ophelia opened the door and went in. They were all in the drawing room. Brierly facing Rowan, Langford holding him, Redgrave nearby. Cedric and Eldritch at the back.
She'll die before you find her, Brierly sneered. You'll never see her again. Oh yes.
Ophelia's voice was soft.
Lethal.
Brierly screamed.
The sound shattered the moment.
Rowan reacted at the same time as Langford. He broke free of the grip, lunged forward and struck first. His fist hit one of Brierly's men in the throat. Another went down when Langford slammed him into the wall. Redgrave barked an order, and the guards burst in from the corridor. Brierly tried to retreat to find an exit, but Ophelia was already there. She stepped in her way steady, and when the woman raised her hand, Ophelia stopped her with the short dagger barely grazing her wrist, just enough to force her to drop the weapon. Rowan seized her from behind then, immobilizing her without mercy, and threw her to the floor. In seconds Frost's men were subdued, disarmed and bound. One bled from the brow, another groaned on the floor, and the rest had lost all will to fight. Ophelia and Rowan stood together in the center of the drawing room, still breathless. He slipped an arm around her shoulders. She rested her forehead against his chest for barely a second, just long enough to be sure he was alive.
Outside, footsteps were already audible, orders, the metallic sound of handcuffs.
Frost was hauled up from the floor without any dignity, her white dress stained, her icy gaze finally broken. As they took her away, Ophelia did not look at her. She lifted her eyes to Rowan, and he without a word held her tighter.
They had survived.
Together. Langford was the first to laugh.
They locked her in, he repeated, incredulous.
Ophelia held her smile until Rowan reached her. When he touched her face, she broke. She ran up to the first bedroom, slammed the door, and collapsed onto the bed. Rowan followed and wrapped her in his arms.
It's over, he whispered. It's all over. I didn't abandon you, she sobbed. I stayed until they dragged me out by force.
I kept my word.
I never doubted. I was so afraid. So was I, he admitted, his voice breaking. When I thought they had.
She cut him off, wiping her tears on his jacket.
We can't blaspheme anymore. I promised God.
Rowan nodded, solemn.
I would have promised anything, Ophelia murmured. I need you. And I need you. We can't lie or steal either, she added. I promise that too.
Rowan raised an eyebrow. Do your promises include me?
We're equal partners, she said with a tired smile. We share everything. We are equals, he confirmed. Then my promises are yours too.
Rowan held her tighter.
Yes.
Chapter 66. Where the night no longer hurts. Suddenly Rowan pulled back, his expression tense with obvious concern.
You didn't give up anything else, did you?
Ophelia understood immediately what he meant.
Like, for example, dancing. Like making love.
She laughed, a bright open laugh.
Isn't that the same?
Ophelia, this is not the time for jokes.
No, Rowan, she said softly. We didn't give up dancing or loving each other. I would never make a promise I couldn't keep.
She repeated, without realizing it, his own words. Rowan almost tore her clothes off right then, but reality intervened. There was still so much to repair in the house, and far too many matters left unsettled. For the next 2 days they barely saw each other. Rowan and Langford dictated reports, recorded what had happened, and ordered the arrests. Lady Brierly was transferred to Newgate. Later, rumors spread that the court had declared her insane, and she would be committed. Ophelia felt not the slightest compassion. When they were finally alone, they fulfilled the postponed promise without hurry. They spent quiet, shared days, as if the outside world had been put on hold.
And just as Ophelia had promised, they were happy.
Epilogue. 1 year later. Rowan still seemed restless, a shadow Ophelia could not overlook.
On the morning of their first anniversary, he asked her to promise to stay for another year.
The request came at an exceptionally inconvenient moment. Ophelia was in the middle of labor.
Rowan, we're going to have our child. I know, love.
He touched her belly with reverent awkwardness.
I warned you a while ago, he added, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Are you feeling warm too?
No. Give me your promise, he insisted.
Then you can go back to sleep.
Ophelia had no strength to argue. She had spent the night awake, following Lydia's advice that husbands rarely handled the weight well. Since the night Ophelia had entrusted him with Langford's file, Lydia had become more than a friend.
There was absolute trust between them. Promise me now, Rowan whispered.
When the contraction eased, Ophelia nodded.
Yes.
I promise.
Now go wake Lydia.
The baby took 3 more hours to arrive. During the birth, Rowan remained steady, attentive, exactly as Ophelia knew he would. They only removed him when the situation became critical, and even then he returned ahead of schedule, pale and apologetic, begging forgiveness for every pang of pain. Minutes later, he held their daughter in his arms. Holling rushed into the room at the first cries, took the newborn with overflowing solemnity, and declared she was perfect. Lydia tended to Ophelia. Rowan helped as best he could, and when someone praised his efficiency he even managed to smile. It was only afterward, when everything had ended, that control left him.
Is she okay?
Ophelia asked, exhausted.
She fainted, Holling replied, eyes fixed on the baby. But she's all right. Perfectly.
Ophelia bit her lip to keep from laughing.
Hold her when you can. She's not in a condition right now, the butler said. The priority is the little one.
Ophelia smiled, moved.
She'll never tell what happened, will she?
Holling promised she wouldn't. 3 days later, the newspaper published the news. Rowan didn't mind.
The jokes couldn't tarnish anything.
He had fulfilled his mission, closed the circle, and had finally found that which he didn't even know he was searching for. The silence in the room was deep, broken only by Rowan's uneven breathing, still unconscious in the chair beside the bed. Ophelia held the baby against her chest. She was tiny, warm, incredibly real. Ophelia watched as she opened and closed her fingers, as if already trying to grasp the world.
Hello, she whispered. You've arrived in the middle of everything, but that's a family thing.
The newborn made the smallest sound, almost a sigh.
At that moment, Rowan stirred.
He opened his eyes, disoriented, and the first thing he saw was Ophelia looking at him with a mix of exhaustion and absolute tenderness.
Everything, he murmured. Everything is fine, she replied. Come.
Rowan struggled to sit up and moved toward the bed. Ophelia carefully placed the baby in his arms.
He held her as if afraid to break her. She's perfect, he said, his voice cracking. She is.
The baby opened her eyes for a moment. Rowan held his breath.
Does she have a name? He asked.
Ophelia nodded.
Her name will be Eleanor.
For those who endured before us, and for those who will come after. Rowan tilted his head, moved and kissed his daughter's forehead.
Then he looked at Ophelia. You promised to stay for another year. I promised to stay, she corrected him. Time was never part of the deal.
He smiled, finally at peace. Ophelia rested her head on his shoulder, and the 3 of them remained together, bound by something stronger than vows, files, or hunts.
The world could wait. The hound had laid down his weapons.
Ophelia had learned to read light, not as immediate revelation but as consequence. First came the darkness, not emptiness but the fertile time in which everything prepares itself without showing.
The heavens taught it that way. The prayer repeated it that way.
Stars were not born shining, they burned only after enduring infinite pressure in the invisible. God, she thought, had not created the world in a continuous burst of clarity but in rhythm, shadow, pause, dawn. A seed does not demand to be seen while it germinates. Neither does the truth.
That was why she distrusted those who ran.
Those who wanted to manifest, without first bearing the weight of silence. Men sometimes ran too much. She had run from her very origin, carrying an inherited darkness she had not chosen but had to traverse. Rowan ran because he was a hunter, because he had learned to believe that truth was conquered by pursuit. Both had defended an order, institutions, oaths, a sense of justice, and yet now they walked within a twilight they could not fully name.
It was never about destroying the darkness.
It was about inhabiting it without corruption, allowing it to fulfill its function, to gestate. Ophelia prayed that they would understand this before misidentifying the enemy. Because bringing something to light was not to tear it out violently, but to accompany its maturation until it could stand on its own without deforming. Creating, she knew, was a divine vocation. Not merely engendering life, but shaping meaning. And when that creative energy was repressed by fear, guilt, or haste, what emerged was not order but rigidity.
Not light but glare.
Perhaps that was why the star Sirius shone with such insistence in Ophelia's calculations. Not as an immediate promise, but as a distant beacon. A reminder that consciousness is not imposed, it aligns.
That there are communications that do not pass through words, truths that do not scream, awakenings that do not humiliate the night that preceded them.
True light, Ophelia thought, did not deny the shadow that made it possible. It honored it. The end. Author's note. There are stories written from the shadows. Not because they lack light, but because they understand, perhaps before we do, that everything which truly matters needs a period of darkness in order to take shape. This novel was born that way, on the margins, in the half-light, in the spaces that official history tends to ignore. Set in London, in the year when one war ends and another quieter one begins, this story is not only about pirates, marquises, or conspiracies. It is about a world that has won, and does not know what to do with its victory. About a society that proclaims order while resting on exclusion, hypocrisy, and forgetting. About institutions that claim to protect the light, yet fear what they cannot control. The English Regency was an era of outward splendor and inner fracture. Brilliant salons and streets sunk in misery. Public honor and private violence. Law and margin existing only a few steps apart. In that ambiguous territory, the characters of this novel run, flee, pursue, but above all they try to discern what it is they are truly defending. Rowan believes he serves a legitimate order. Ophelia has learned to survive outside it. He is a hunter trained to restrain himself, she heir to a night she did not choose yet learned how to inhabit. Between them there is no easy meeting, no immediate redemption.
There is friction.
Misunderstandings. Desire. A constant tension between what must be done and what, in silence, asks to be acknowledged. The darkness that runs through this story is not the absence of good, but fertile ground. Like soil before the sowing. Like silence before the word. Like the womb that conceives without revealing itself. Ophelia embodies that darkness which does not destroy but prepares. And Rowan, without fully understanding her, begins to sense that there are lights that do not blind because they do not seek to impose themselves. While writing these pages, I returned again and again to a simple and difficult idea at once. Light does not oppose shadow, it is exercised within it. We live in a time, and perhaps it has always been so, that demands we display, shine, prove.
But this story chose to linger on the opposite, on incubation, on waiting, on what grows when no one is watching.
Creation here is not conquest or possession, but the courage to sustain what has not yet taken form. The faith that runs through this novel is not certainty or reward.
It is listening.
It is walking without guarantees. It is accepting that not everything can be understood at once, and that it can still be honored. Consciousness, individual and collective, evolves when we stop fleeing our dark zones and learn to look at them without judgment. Perhaps that is why this story speaks so much of veiled identities, of confused names, of truths that cannot be revealed all at once without destroying what they are meant to save. Not everything is meant to be illuminated immediately. Some lights arrive late, and for that very reason, arrive exactly when they should. If this book leaves anything with the reader, may it be this intuition, that darkness is not always an enemy, that desire is not always a fall, that law without conscience becomes blind, and that to love truly is not to seek refuge but to expose oneself to transformation. Because in the end, as in the ancient cycles that govern both the earth and the stars, everything follows a rhythm vaster than ourselves: gestation, pause, revelation. All light is born in shadow, and only those who dare to dwell within it can become its heir. With deep gratitude and respect for what still remains veiled. Elara, Whitford.